These teachers supported that, all the lockdown. Okay. Then you have these entire unions and administrative officials supporting chief diversity officer. What kind of people do you think are spending that $32,000 a year of your taxpayer, your property taxes? What kind of people do you think are handling that money? And maybe that's why your children are illiterate to property taxes. It makes it feel or seem or on paper act and legally be defined, I would argue, much more like renting. So it's so bad in places like Texas, by the way, you would think a very free state, that some people now are finally stepping up trying to fix it.
Texans want to own their own property, not rent it from government. We must provide that by eliminating property taxes in Texas.
Okay. And he's a wheelchair guy.
Yeah. He's getting there.
So here's the thing. That's good to hear. Unfortunately, if you don't pay your property taxes now, you don't own your property anymore.
Well, they can come and take it from you.
Yeah, they come and they take it from you.
Literally.
At gunpoint.
You could have paid for the house.
Yes.
Over 30 years.
Let's make no mistake. Taxes are, they take your money, and if you don't give it to them, people with guns take you to jail.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. And those people with guns who will take you to jail for not paying monthly something that you already own, many of those people believe that you should not have the right to own guns. Now, I'm not saying that you take out an AR-15 if someone tries to collect, property taxes or the HOA shows up. Don't misinterpret it.
Those are worse.
So they're often a local tax, property taxes, and they do vary a lot depending on location. So let me give you a couple of quick numbers. Average property tax in America is about $3,800. Okay,
that's low.
Lowest average tax bill is Alabama, $882. Highest average tax bill, New York State, $12,000. Okay, these are averages that I'm giving you. Now, let me ask you this before I move on. What do you think property taxes pay for? Because I'm willing to bet that a lot of people will say, hey, things like roads, police department, maybe fire department, things that you would think are legitimate roles of governments that are, non-rivalrous, right?
Yep.
These are terms that people would use like, okay, there's no incentive necessarily for private enterprise to get in. There's no way to necessarily make more money. I would argue that's not necessarily true with things like roads, but okay. So that's probably what you believe. Let me go through the claims versus the truth with property tax. Here's a claim. They tell you that property taxes are necessary for funding social programs. Okay. Here's the truth. The lion's share of your property taxes go to schools. Now, I know you're thinking, hey, that must be a good thing, right? The average is 40% across the country, okay? The high is 89% of property taxes going to schools. All right, so you might say, but that's a good thing, right? We need public schools. It's the apple of my eye.
Yeah.
It's the crown jewel of the United States.
But what if I don't have kids and I don't want to pay for school?
Well, you know what? You're shit out of luck.
I have kids. I'm just,
I know.
They're not in school yet.
I know.
You just want to pay for them.
He has a wonderful beard. Now, you might think, good, okay, so it's not really going to roads. It's not really going to the police. It's not really going to fire department. Oh, all right, but it's going to schools. That's a good thing. Okay, so let's go to another claim. The only reason you would think that's good is because you believe that schools need more money to improve education, or you believe that more money equals better public schools. Here's the truth. No. And this is what, if nothing else, you need to disabuse people of this notion that money equals better schooling. Because even people on the right, when they're running for office, they go, and we need to fund our schools. Or you'll hear people say, money to Ukraine, those billions of dollars could be used to, even if you took every single dollar that was spent, sent over to Ukraine, guess what? It wouldn't help at all. It would not improve the metrics in public schooling. The way our schools are, it's actually incapable of improving with increased funding.
Yeah. Public education is a public disaster to the tune of trillions of dollars over the last few decades.
Right.
This is a terrible way to spend money.
So your property taxes largely going to schools. Okay. From 2000 to 2020, per pupil spending in the United States went up 27%. Oh, wow. Okay. The average is $16,000 per pupil. We make all the references publicly available. Okay. So $16,000 per pupil is the average spending, meaning per person in the class.
Yeah.
Okay. Went up 27%. What do we have for that? More money, better schools. No, the results, the education performances by all observable, by everything quantifiable, plummeted. We're worse off. More money, and we are worse off. From 2013 to 2022, scores went down. Fourth grade math scores went down 2%. Reading scores down 2%. In the eighth grade, math scores went down 5%.
So it got worse.
Reading scores went down, but down 3%.
Yeah.
I don't even know how if it already went down, in the 4th grade, how are you even reading in the 8th grade? Why is that even relevant? You should stay in 4th.
I didn't think you get to pass.
The SAT scores. Think of how much money.
Yeah.
The lowest we've seen since 2005.
Wow.
The lowest we have seen since 2005. Yeah. And we always say, try to look to an extreme example and sort of scale it back from that. Okay, let's get a case study. Mm-hmm. New York City. Okay, so the median property tax in New York, $9,000. Okay, $9,091, right? That's the median. It's the highest in the United States. The per pupil spending, remember I just gave you the average of $16,000? It's $32,000. Really closer to $33,000 in New York.
Oh my God.
New York City.
Whoa.
Okay?
Per pupil.
Yes, highest in the United States. The result? Half of 3rd through 8th grade students fail reading tests. And think about this for a second. Not only is reading comprehension going down, it's going down at a time when people have more access to literature than ever.
Yeah, but then there's TikTok, so it's hard to compete.
Exactly. Never has a generation of people had more tools at their disposal and been less capable in the basic, fundamental skills of reading. Now, this isn't just talking about, Zoomers. No, the schools are obviously failing them.
Yes.
But so is our culture at large.
Yeah.
Half, 32,000. That means that if you're spending $32,000 on that child in New York City, and there is a 50% chance that $32,000 has created an illiterate child.
That's unbelievable.
That $32,000 per year. So do the math. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. You got about $130,000, depending on where you are, and can't read.
Yeah.
For that much money.
It gets
That's
worse.
bad.
It gets worse.
Worse?
Yeah, it does. It does get worse.
So depressing.
I know what he's thinking. Mr. Affluence. He's like, I knew I should have stayed home today. Baltimore. Okay, per pupil spending there is $21,000. Not as much as New York City, but you know, it's not.
Properties are less valuable.
Yeah. I mean, they're Bob's
out.
Big Boy and a couple of crack houses. There's a lot of those.
Crack houses coming back though.
They are coming back, but they don't pay a lot of property taxes.
That's true.
Yeah.
So it's the 4th highest rate in the United States per pupil spending. What's the result? Again, property taxes. Most of the money goes to schools. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the areas where they spend more money on schools. 40% of high schools did not have, this number is going to shock you.
Hold on.
A single student proficient in math.
What?
40% of high schools in the Baltimore area did not have one single student proficient in math. Just kidnap an Asian.
I was going to say, get some Chinese students in there.
40%. Pull that back up.
Is there no Chinatown in Baltimore?
None.
I know, right?
0.
Look at that. The article says it, and then to make sure at the very end, not one student. To make sure that you understand, this is not hyperbole. Like they are
not
just
one student.
Give them more money.
Wow.
So we've given more money. More money. We're throwing money at the problem.
More tutors.
And that comes from your property taxes. So when you pay that check, when you I guess if you pay by check anymore, it's probably on auto pay. But the point remains, that's going to not one single student proficient in math. 30% of all Baltimore high school students, by the way, they have a graduation, 30% of all Baltimore high schools.
Yeah.
They have a graduation rate below 50%.
Wow.
What?
One of the high schools was 14%. Now think about that. You just talked about the money. Let's say a kid goes through a few grades. You've now spent $90,000 on them, and they drop out anyway.
Yeah.
You thought Gaza was bad.
That's what we call a societal loss leader.
Oh my God.
It's like college.
How is Baltimore a thing anymore? What are we doing here? I thought Detroit was the worst place.
It did used to be the worst.
It did.
It did used to be the worst. And by
Hold
the way,
my beer said Baltimore.
we could maybe pull from. We'll pull it later. I did a documentary, Detroit in Ruins. This was in 2009 or 2010, where I talked about how children in Detroit high schools and their per pupil spending back then was higher than the national average. I think the national average was around 10,000. I'm going by road. I think Detroit was 13,000. That shows you how much the spending has
over
increased.
14 now.
In other words, if there was enough money, Detroit schools would be doing well.
Yeah.
And a student who enters into high school in Detroit, freshman entering, has more chance of ending up in prison than graduating, right? Now, I had that in the documentary. I stand by it completely.
Yeah.
I was fact-checked.
Yeah.
You know what they said? No, and this was the Department of Education there in Michigan, or the teachers' unions, and then it was circulated through local, I think, Fox outlets or MLive. They said, oh, that's actually not true. The vast majority of Detroit seniors graduate high school. I did not say seniors. I said someone entering into high school has more of a chance. There's a higher likelihood that they end up in prison than graduating high school. The fact that the teachers unions were involved in fact-checking me on that tells you that they don't actually want what's best for your kids. Why would I give a rat's ass about the people who've already made it to senior year? It's a career. We're talking about a career average here.
Yeah.
That was back then. Think about that. 14% graduation rate at a school in Baltimore.
Jeez.
30% have rates below 50%. That is absolutely at over $20,000 per pupil. We'll get into why that's the case. Well, you know what? We'll go back to, I don't want to go to the guy at work right now. He's been trying to get in here. Right. So here's another truth that you need to know. If more money worked, okay, here's how leftists manipulate you. Generally speaking, you in your household, if you get more money, you spend it on things that you need, right? You are allocating money to things that you need.
Right.
So they're banking on you making that logical assumption of the government. That's not true, though. That is not true. When it's not your money, you don't spend it that way. You don't allocate it that way. You assume that more money means more resources to achieve the results that you want. So you copy-paste that to government. More money must mean they have more capabilities of creating better schools. They do not. Here's why. From 2000 to 2019, the hiring of administrators is what they placed a prayer. It far, far outpaced any type of growth in student or teacher populations.
Wait.
Is this in high school?
Yes. It's across all schools.
Administrators.
They hired more administrators.
Because they will say, we need more teachers per classroom.
That's
not what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're hiring more administrators.
So what do administrators do? They fundraise?
Bureaucracy?
Yeah.
To give you an idea, as far as when we're taking schools collectively and how many people are involved, students, teachers, administrators, students and teachers, they make up about 10% of the population.
What?
10%. Administrative positions, 87%. So when people say, when you hear Barack Obama...
That's the growth. That's the growth. So just to be clear, student and teacher population grew by 10%.
Sorry, the growth, yes.
Administrative positions by almost
grew
90%.
by 87%. Sorry,
wow.
yes.
That's insane. Unreal.
They have outpaced them by, 87 to 10%, their growth, respectively. I don't mean that's the total. You probably should admonish me on that.
Well, later.
I should have been very clear. That being said, 87% growth in administrators versus 10% growth in teachers and students. So when you hear them say, hey, if you remember a great teacher who changed your life, go and thank a teacher. Sure. Do you remember a great vice principal secretary?
Nope.
Who had an impact on your life?
Yeah.
I actually do. There was one. Her name was Mrs. Trainer. She let me use the hole punch when I was supposed to be punished. She let me use the hole punch, and then I'd open it up and have a mask.
Well, one does.
But it didn't change my life.
No.
And it certainly wasn't worth $32,000 a year. So then you have the administrator's salaries also outpaced teacher salaries. The money is not going to teachers. So in 2023, the average teacher salary was about $68,469. The average K through 12 administrator salary is $102,650. And guys, can you let me know, is that annualized or is that what they actually make? That's what they actually make?
I believe that's what they actually make, which if you add in the 3 months off.
If you add in the 3 months off, teachers aren't doing that badly. That means it's about $85,000 a year plus full bennies.
In Massachusetts, the average was $92,000.
That's for
a year.
For a teacher or for
a teacher? For a teacher.
I'd rather.
Is that including the 3 months off?
Bring that overlay up really quickly. The one that we just did that had the salaries in there, you can read up in there in the top on the left. Mississippi was at like 48,000, 92,000 Massachusetts. Wow.
I mean, I don't mind that teachers are getting paid more. It's the administrators that are getting paid more than the people.
I mind that the teachers are getting paid more because of the stats we just quoted on how poor students are doing.
Yes, that's a good point.
Listen, you get less pay until they do better.
Your children are illiterate, so you get nothing.
I bet you. Let's.
I know it's a bigger issue.
Teachers
than
might
just
be
teachers.
fine. It might be the parents that suck.
No, I definitely
or the
agree
lack
with
of
that.
parents.
That's a good point.
But you can't just come in and keep asking for more money, please.
I agree.
So.
Yeah, well, it's across the board, though. It's across the board that public schools don't do a good job. So an administrator, $102,000. Of course, and the benefits, the kind of benefits that you can't possibly imagine unless you're either a public sector worker or educator or administrator.
Hero. Say it.
Hero. Sorry, true hero.
Say it right.
True hero.
Okay.
True hero. And by the way, you should be able to work from home in Zoom because if you show up with some kids who are have the sniffles, you're taking your life in your hands.
Yes.
Pick a different career.
The roles of the administrator have almost nothing to do with teaching your kids. Again, this is all about property taxes. 79% of school districts, right? We try to take some bigger districts. They have more than 100,000 students. They have a chief diversity officer. There you go.
They have a what?
They have a chief diversity officer.
to make sure, like, there's an equal
There
number
are a
of
bunch of useless
people
stuff.
of color in gym.
Yes.
How would you affect? Is it the teachers they're supposed to, administrators to have
I'm just
diversity?
taking this as an extreme example of absurdity because people bitch about DEI, right, and these kinds of corporate
Rightfully
scores.
so.
But your taxpayer, your property taxes are paying for these absurd costs in schools, and then you have someone like a chief diversity officer, who, by the way, let me give you an example: Columbus, Ohio, the city school chief diversity officer, $137,000 a year.
How
God.
does what?
I'm getting whoever this person is on off limits so I can push back.
How can children not learn if not for a woke environment? That's how they flourish. They need to be led by a chief like this.
Yeah.
Do we, I guess we don't have it. Never mind. Oh, thank you.
There it is. Yeah. Nothing like being late to the punch.
They call her squats on fifth.
I was ready with the off limits.
Squats on fist.
What?
Did
Off
you say
limits?
squats on fist?
Brian said off limits.
So, and this is the other problem too. Your property taxes are funding propaganda.
Yeah.
Propaganda concentration camps. Let's be really clear. What do you think happens when your kids are being taught by a bunch of teachers who refuse to go into work because of COVID? You know, right there, you know where they line up politically on that, right? They bought everything hook, line, and sinker. Public teachers, they supported the idea of vaccine mandates, of masking all your children, which has, by the way, created irreparable damage to children's being able to pick up on social cues, facial recognition. We have our own internal facial recognition software. They don't know how to interact with people. They have suffered from the highest mental health mental illness that we've seen, and our addiction rates are through the roof. Drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Kids don't know what to do when they get onto the workforce. So these teachers supported that, all the lockdown. Okay. Then you have these entire unions and administrative officials supporting chief diversity officer. What kind of people do you think are spending that $32,000 a year of your taxpayer, your property taxes? What kind of people do you think are handling that money? And maybe that's why your children are illiterate. Are you sure about those property taxes?
Yeah. And by the way, they have no problem making sure that they have access to books that describe sexual acts to 4-year-old or 5-year-old. Sorry,
whitewashing it. Porn.
Exactly. Pornography, right? Yeah. They literally have pornography in the libraries. They have to make sure that they go and spend the money on those types of things, and making sure that you can't complain about it, because then they call you the canceller, which goes back to what you said, the Saul Alinsky tactic. We want you to not have these books in there. No. We're not trying to ban books. We're trying to ban pornography.
Yeah. Let's review this again while we go through property taxes. Okay. You never actually own anything because of these property taxes. All right. In America, up to 89% of your property taxes go to fund schools. They're spending more money than ever, largely on administrative positions like chief diversity officers, while your academic performance as it relates to your children is dropping dramatically. 2/3 of American children cannot read good. And your tax money is being used to fund a completely failing system that is indoctrinating kids about white privilege, Common Core math, diversity, wokeness, while they tell them that American history is something that could be triggering, so we're not going to let them know about the Founding Fathers. God. There you go. Are you starting to realize the scheme? When people talk about a rigged game, property taxes is one of them. And when I say we should defund the federal Department of Education, you guys think that's extreme? I'm starting to think that most state schools suck as well.
They absolutely do.
And know, when you guys talk about this, I always try to
just acted like he wasn't even talking.
He did.
I'm so sorry.
Like I'm not even.
But I want you to hold that because I want you both to get it.
Yeah, I just got so worked up.
Because Gerald's going to give his on-limits comment.
This is.
And then you're going to
start a new show that's called On Limits with a white background and me and
I don't need that competition.
Blackface. That's not going to happen. Yeah, I can't do that.
No, I'm sorry, Gerald.
So look, here's the solution. Blow up the federal Department of Education. We've already talked about that, but we need to get rid of public.
Careful.
We have to literally.
Yeah, my God. Okay, folks. Crying out loud.
Metaphorically blow it up.
Dismember the federal Department of Education.
That's fine.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't physically do anything. I'm just saying the organization itself needs to go away. Can't say that either. The problem that we have right now is that it's not a money issue. We've thrown money at this problem for decades, literally trillions and trillions of dollars wasted on public schooling. What we need to do is to tie parents to the success of their children again. It is not the responsibility of the government to educate your children. It is your responsibility to make sure they're prepared for life. Period. When you have communities like this that we talked about in Baltimore and New York that are struggling like this, those are communities typically that live in poverty, and parents don't tend to pay much attention to their kids' schooling. And this does not absolve teachers and administrators. They are a huge part of the problem because they know, and then they still ask for more money as though that will solve the problem. So right now, and there are problems with this, but talk through it. Every single state Now, you have to sell every bus. By the way, the bus that I rode to school that didn't have a seat belt.
I know.
Kids.
I was always getting mixed messages. They were saying, buckle up. I'm like, well, all I have is the safety bar of the seat in front of me on my bus.
That just shows you back in the 1990s that the money that you're spending on schools, that's how they innovate. They're like, kids, buses, they could die in a car crash. We typically protect them with like special seats and stuff in cars. We don't have enough to
getting curb stomped on the bench in front of you is a learning experience.
Yeah, but lesbian Susie Q needs some more money and 3 more months off, apparently. But seatbelts will get around to that, right? We need to get rid of these things, sell the schools right now, over time, start bringing in the private sector to actually, the public sector to actually start putting programs together so that you can have better education systems, and we'd stop funding these things altogether.
Accountability, right?
The education business. And here's why I know it works, right? Parents tend to pay a little bit of attention when you're in public school, right? They're like, you got to get good grades on your report card. The minute mom and dad start writing checks to a college and they're like, holy crap, what are you doing with this? Accountability kicks in because now you're physically writing the check. It's not just property taxes and you're not really sure where it's going. You're writing a check going, you failed how many classes? No. You're going to community college.
Yep.
It works when you make the parents responsible for what's going on with their children. Guess what? Your children.
And you can change it, by the way. This is why your local elections matter. You can have a direct impact on both your property taxes, where they go, and how your schools are being run. That's something you can do. You can't control which asshat becomes speaker. You really can't. At this point, it's out of your hands. What is in your hands is the people who are in your own backyard, the taxes that you pay, your property taxes, and holding their feet to the fire. Yes, Mr.
Well, I'm thinking about the fact that I like that. Mr. Off Limits is good. I'm thinking about the fact that it's when you have a party, a political party that is aligned with this kind of insanity, from gender ideology to giving more money, indiscriminate money to schools and stuff. How are you supposed to be in the middle? How are you in any way supposed to say, I'm Democrat heavy, Republican light? That doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
You're either on the right or you are far left and part of the insanity.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the so when you say something, I had a guest on my podcast, Off Limits, who said that he had worked for Biden, said, I think Biden's a moderate. The problem is he may be temperamentally a moderate or maybe historically. If he's aligned with this kind of stuff, then he ain't a moderate. He is on the far left, and he is a disaster for this country. And you only have one choice, which is to be don't call me far right, call me traditional and sensible and on the side of truth, which would be, I don't know.
Conservative.
But you also, what was funny is you said gender ideology.
I said ideology, and I meant it. And I meant it because the Native Americans...
Chicks with dicks.
I see a parody song.
Chicks with dicks are men with manginas.
And by the way, look...
Yeah, I said it.
You're not going to like this. You're not going to like this. But I'm going to make a comparison right now.
Careful. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
So the current administration is basically like Hamas right now. And here's how.
Oh, boy.
They use you to get what they want. Hamas will do things to its population that are not good for its population to get what they want.
They will use your
right
kids.
now, the administration is using your kids in these failed systems to get what they want, and that's more power and more control over you. They do not care about you. They do not want you to have more freedom. They don't want you to have more upward mobility. They don't want you to have a better life. They want you to be suckling at the government teeth the rest of your life and depending on them for everything you have. That is not me being a conspiracy theorist. That is the natural endpoint of their plans.
You know what?
Every single time.
If you're Mr. Off Limits, he's like hockey. He's Mr. Out of bounds because he can't go out of bounds in hockey.
There we go.
You can't go out of bounds.
No, it's a self-defeating nickname.
I never thought of that.
There's no winning. But you know
out
what?
of bounds.
Let me reduce this, and I would love to hear from you. You can comment below, hit the like button. It helps with the algorithm. We're going to go on to Mug Club here in a little bit. Before we get to what you just said, which I agree with, but you know that's not going to happen. I have had a call out to anyone, any actual representative, member of the teachers union, because their policy forbids them from supporting this, any member of the Democratic Party who opposes this policy, anyone who actually carries some weight as a legislative official or representative, I don't care if it's the ADF, whatever it is, or the ADL, or what's the other one, Southern Poverty Law Center, anyone who actually in an official capacity opposes school vouchers. I've never heard an argument against it. I've never expressed it to anyone who, once they've understood it, has been against it. We did white and black on the gray issues, right? Black and white and the gray issues with this one black lady and her daughter, who immediately went to every single trope they could imagine. White fragility, check your white privilege, white guilt, colonialism, the nuclear family is white supremacy. And even they, when I said, well, what about school vouchers? And I said, before we change anything else, before we go to dismembering the Department of Education, before we go to charter schools, just make it so that the average per pupil spending is attached to the student. And if you're willing to drive or use your bicycle, or take a municipal bus, you can take that number, that money, to any school you want. That's just that as the first change. Rather than money goes to the school, you go to the school,
that would incentivize
money attached
schools
to the student.
Yeah.
That's the easiest first switch. I have never heard a single valid argument against it. No one has even presented it, yet we don't do it in this country.
It's incredible.
As a matter of national policy, when we talk about common ground, why don't we change that tomorrow? And do you know how I know it's not that hard to do? That's effectively what happened where I was raised in Canada. I didn't realize until I moved to the States, and Canada sucks. But I went to a school that would have been outside of my school, a public school. I went to Centennial Regional High School. If I were in the States, I would have had to go to Chambly High. That was the drug kid school. They said, oh yeah, if you're willing to get on this bus, or if your parents are willing to drive you, you can go to any of these schools. And guess what? They were far better than the United States. Still a far cry from private schools or charter schools. It was so foreign to me when I came to the States. And I said, wait, when I was looking at houses, what does that mean? That they say, oh, that's the school in your district. I go, you mean one of? They said, no, that's your school. That's the school? If I live here, I have to go to that? You don't have any choice?
None.
That's a uniquely American, for the shining city on a hill. That is a uniquely American stain in our history, and it is not being changed because of special interest group today. And by the way, what's the Proton Mail? Maybe we can have them reach out, just like the IDF and everyone else. LWC tips at Proton Mail. One legislative official, or let's say a member of a think tank as it relates to education, who can lay out the case for why a school voucher program would be a bad thing. I've never heard it. In my life, I am open.
I know what the left would say with school vouchers. I know what they'd say. They would say...
Racist.
No, they would say, no, the problem with school vouchers is the people that can afford to get on a bus, a bicycle, or in a car and go to that school would go to those good schools, and those schools would compete for those dollars and get better. And then the kids that couldn't afford to, it's exactly the same argument they make for the lack of an ID for voting, or, for example, why a lot of times they should have voting on a different day because people have to work and they can't, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it doesn't hold water, but I understand the argument.
I agree.
But Gerald, is that...
I wrote it down. It ends public education.
But here's the thing. That's what
exactly agreeing with him.
But that's what they will say. But here's the thing. It doesn't. I'm not even talking. I'm saying before we get to any type of private, you're still spending the same amount.
Yeah, it makes
Baltimore.
It makes better
New York City, 32,000 per people. You're still spending 32,000 per people. I'm talking about before scaling back a dime. Just make it so they have the choice. And I know. And yes, they'll say that. But guess what? It still doesn't change the fact that they're no worse off.
Correct.
Right now,
correct.
If they do have a parent, or they do have the ability to get into a bus ticket or get in a tandem bicycle, guess what? They still have to go to that shitty school. Yep. So if you're saying that some people have such awful parents, have no bicycle, have no friends who will carpool with them, have no ability to ride a bus,
arms and legs.
And what happens? Well, they'd end up at the exact same school where they're forced to go now.
Yeah, no, my point is what it would do is it would shine a light on really bad schools, and parents would not put up with it, and it would end the public education system. They don't say it ends the public education system. They would say it's not fair because it would pull money out of the public education system. And you're right, it wouldn't. It would just transfer it, and it would highlight, these guys are good, y'all are really bad.
And by the way, you know what else could happen? The most likely scenario, even if that school where they're going right now, right now, let's just, all right, here, let me give you a visual aid.
All right.
We
should get you a whiteboard.
You guys, we should all run for office.
Just kidding.
Okay. Here's a circle right now. All right, I don't know if you can see.
That's a circle.
All right, is it clear if I put on that?
It's
good circle.
Is it clear?
Did it without a compass.
All right, so there you go. Right now, I live here, so I have to go to this school. All right, okay. Now we say, hey, wait a second. School choice, voucher, meaning same money is spent. We're not cutting any money. All right. Circle's a little bit bigger. Now there's 1, 2, 3.
Looks
Stop
like
it.
a boob.
Big old titties.
You are adults.
Sorry.
We are?
You're supposed to be. Stop it, Mr. Out of Bounds. Take it up with Mr. Off Limits after the show. So right now you have to go to this school. So we just expand it. And by the way, you might have a school that's only 5 blocks away that you can't go to.
Tits.
All right. So right now, this school, when you're in this scenario, there's a little bit of nipple hair.
Tits.
If you are in this scenario,
I can't focus.
there is no reason for that school to improve, right? At the very least, we know they have not improved. Test scores have gone down.
Right,
They've never gotten better.
Never gotten it right.
They've had enough time. Let's put it that way.
Draw the other
Okay.
one. Draw the other one.
Stop it.
We need another school.
So now I did do another school. They're just not big enough. All right. Okay.
Oh, you got
By the way,
zits on her tits.
you might want to go to a doctor and get this checked out. I don't know if it's so.
She's got the
Now,
pox.
let's say, okay, the person has to drive a little further. All right, they have to drive a little further. The argument is, but if they don't have parents with the car, or if they don't have an ability to take a bus, okay, so the assumption is this school will take all of this school's money. Or do you think the more likely scenario so that this school avoids being shut down for the first time in the history of this school, they might actually start trying to provide better schooling. And even if it's not as good as school number 2, 3, or 4, guess what? It'll be better than it is now. There is no real world scenario in which every school doesn't improve to some degree. It would be impossible. And you know what happens if that school shuts down and the other schools there'll be another school. It will open up. Still taxpayer funded, you and your property taxes, assuming that you still believe in them and that we can't have actually privatized school. There is no scenario in which anything gets worse. It can only improve. Anyone out there, send in your representative. Send anyone you have who can make a cohesive argument that makes any sense. We are going to continue, by the way. Hopefully, comment if you guys like when sometimes we go in deep.
Diagrams are good. What happens when they go to the school that's shaped like a vagina?
No, they don't. Well, here's the thing: is if they're going, sometimes you have
What?
Well, sometimes, and then I didn't get into you have double school district, but then you can actually, if you have a plane, you can privately.
Hey, that's off limits for real.
Hey, nothing is off limits.
Watch Slider with Crowder live Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.